Mr. Speaker,
Republican Congressman Thomas Massie is Mr. Popular at home, but not so much in Washington, D.C., where some call him Mr. No.
I'm a no.
This week, he unleashes on the nation's standing tab, now past $36 trillion, and on his colleagues.
It's a suicide pact to spend us into oblivion. The Republican budget.
And he's holding nothing back.
He's the leader of the fools. We can just, anybody following him now is a fool as well.
When the state of Maryland takes kids and juveniles into care, many end up in places like this.
When I was younger, I was abused.
When the state opened the legal doors for victims to come forward, they found the enormity of abuse could bankrupt the state.
If we hadn't bankrupted the state, we wouldn't be in a position where certain people are looking to cut damages for victims.
This week, the controversy and the cost to fix it.
Chicago is America's third largest city and carries the second largest debt, measured in the billions. We take a look at some of the causes and who's paying for the politicians' priorities.
And it's the ordinary people who are left out, having to pay bigger and bigger taxes.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. There's nobody quite like Republican Congressman Thomas Massie. His no-nonsense libertarian flair has made him a Kentucky fan favorite since 2012, where he's racked up landslides past 80% at the polls. He may be Mr. Popular at home, but in D.C. he's dubbed Mr. No, and his contrarian ways have put him in President Trump's crosshairs. Today he's holding nothing back, calling out his overspending colleagues and the corrupting ways of the swamp.
I think the uniparty here is on the same path they were on before President Trump was elected.
Republican Thomas Massie frequently says the quiet part out loud.
It's because Mike Johnson was doing Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden's bidding.
Even when it's talking out of school about fellow Republicans, their House leader, Mike Johnson, the Trump agenda, and the swamp.
That's a real untold story here, and I think we may be on a collision course. Like, I think there's three cars coming together at an intersection, and they don't realize they're going to hit. And one of them is Congress, with Mike Johnson driving, is in one of these cars. Trump obviously is one of these cars. Maybe he's the train. And then there's another car, which is Doge. And I don't think Elon Musk is going to suffer these fools once he finds out how foolish they are or duplicitous they are. You don't land rockets backwards. You don't get cars to drive themselves on the interstate by ignoring the fools that you're working with.
What fools are you referring to?
Mike Johnson.
Because?
And he's the leader of the fools. We can just, anybody following him now is a fool as well.
Because?
Because
the spending primarily, or?
It's a suicide pact to spend us into oblivion.
A fiscal hawk and MIT-educated engineer, Massie's record in Congress is a highlight reel of lone dissent. He even wears his obsession on his sleeve, actually his lapel, sporting a mini debt clock he designed, ticking up the nation's $36 trillion tab in real time. In 2020, he infuriated both parties by forcing lawmakers back to D.C. for an in-person vote by name on a $2.2 trillion COVID relief bill he saw as fiscally reckless.
Mr. Speaker, I came here to make sure our republic doesn't die by unanimous consent in an empty chamber, and I request a recorded vote.
In 2022, he was the only House member to reject a resolution against anti-Semitism. He argued it threatened free speech. He's continued taking solo stances this year.
Well, I've stood alone 3 times so far in 3 months. I was the only dissenting Republican on making Mike Johnson the Speaker. I was the only dissenting Republican on our budget. And I was the lone dissenting Republican on the continuing resolution, which is a a cut, copy, paste of Biden's last 15 months in office. We're just going to do the same thing for the first 9 months of Trump's administration.
He calls colleagues two-faced on Trump's government shrinking agenda, like plans to shut down the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID.
There are Republicans, for instance, that want that USAID money. I mean, there was a surreal moment for me at the State of the Union when Trump talked about cutting all these Doge things that they had discovered. And my colleagues all stood up and cheered. And I'm like, you're the ones who funded all of this. Like, the Doge is cutting the things that you all did, and now you're applauding. And Elon Musk is at odds with a lot of those Republicans who stood up and clapped, but they're playing along with it right now, and they're going to do sort of I would call it rope-a-dope, maybe, to use a Kentucky boxer analogy here. They're just letting Elon wear himself out.
Massie is also a standout for rejecting what he sees as the corrupting cash grab in Congress. Both parties push members to hit fundraising quotas in order to get rewarded with prime spots on committees. Then they use those roles to rake in donations from the very industries they oversee, blurring ethical lines. Wait, you're describing a relationship where you have to raise money for yourself or for the party to get a good position on a committee?
To get a good committee. This is why I'll never be on what's called an A committee. Those committees are like financial services, ways and means, and energy and commerce. Energy and commerce, by the way, regulates the pharmaceutical companies.
Because then when you're on the important committee, you will do the lobbyist bidding or whatever they prefer.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
If you find that somebody is on a committee that oversees the pharmaceutical companies, you're going to see that's who the pharmaceutical companies donate to. But you're told before you get on the committee, don't even ask for one of these A committees unless you're ready to do the hard work across the street. Across the street means you can't call up and ask for money here in this building we're in right now. You have to walk across the street to the NRCC and make those phone calls. So they'll tell you, unless you're ready to do the hard work across the street, don't ask for one of these committees.
I hear they have like a board up that tells how much, who's raised how much, and what they're supposed to raise, and...
It's the wall of shame. So there's a board that shows what your quota is based on your committee assignment. So if you're on a lesser committee, you may only have to raise $300,000 every election cycle. But if you're on one of these bigger committees, it's more like $1 million or $500,000 you need to raise and give to the party to stay in their good graces. If you look on the wall of shame, I'm at 0.
No dialing for dollars for you.
I haven't done it. I've not done it. I do, by the way, I do help the party. I do give money to candidates who are running in close elections, who have what I believe are sound principles. So I will help them in that way. I'll go to the fundraisers and help them raise money, but I just don't agree with the sort of extortion that goes on with these committee assignments.
Massie's relationship with Trump is a Capitol Hill soap opera. In 2020, Trump branded him a third-rate grandstander and tried to oust him over forcing the in-person COVID vote, but later endorsed Massie for re-election. Massie endorsed Ron DeSantis for 2024, then switched to Trump.
I've had 3 conversations or interactions with the president in the last 9 months. One, he called and left condolences for my loss of my wife, which was very kind. I think it's part of the president a lot of people don't see. He didn't need to do that. It didn't gain him anything politically, but he took time out of his day to call me and offer his condolences. And then I talked to him about 2 weeks before the election about endorsing him, which I ultimately did that same day. And I initiated that phone call, and he took my call on the second ring. And then I talked to him 2 weeks after the election, roughly, about cabinet secretaries. There was discussion, and RFK Jr. was a big fan of this, and the people that are supporting him would hope to see me be ag secretary. And I would have done it. It's not my life ambition. I think I could do a good job of it. But I spoke to Trump about that as well.
So you didn't get picked for that. I didn't know you were even considered.
Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I don't know. But 3 great positive interactions.
That was before Massie was the sole GOP no vote.
I'm a no.
On 2 important Trump-backed bills that passed anyway, one on the budget, another a spending bill that avoided a government shutdown. He said both were fiscally irresponsible. Trump lashed out on Truth Social, branding Massie a grandstander and vowing to lead the charge to get him defeated in his next election.
This is deja vu. He's called me a grandstander again, but this time he didn't qualify as third rate, so I think I'm moving up in the world. But what people know about me is if you attack me, I'm probably going to dig in. You're not going to move me. I'm not bullied. I have no hard feelings toward the president. Sometimes he's a bull in a china shop, and if a few of my dishes get broken, I'm okay.
Do you think that's more about swampy people around him trying to have his ear about you?
Oh, I absolutely do. I think people were whispering in his ear, you need to do something, Mr. President. That day or about a day before that attack, I had come out against getting involved in a war with Iran. And I think there are people in and around the administration who are whispering in his ear, you know, you need to whack this guy. He's feeling his oats here and talking about not having a war and not getting involved in the Middle East and give him a dose of medicine. The tune-up doesn't work on me. I think it's performative to influence other members of Congress who might not be able to weather this. I joke that I've got Trump antibodies from a natural infection in 2020. This was my booster.
For more on this story, listen to my podcast, Full Measure, After Hours. Ahead on Full Measure, the surprising reason why thousands of sexual abuse victims might not get their promised compensation. Thousands of people who are in custody in Maryland as juveniles have emerged from the shadows to expose a harrowing legacy of abuse within state-run detention systems. Their battle for restitution could prove crippling to taxpayers who are asked to pay for the sins of the government. Mackenzie Frost reports.
When the state of Maryland takes kids and juveniles into care, many end up in facilities like this. Some because they've been arrested, others because they're a danger to themselves.
When I was younger, I was abused, and I started running away from home to get away from what was happening to me.
After Patricia Thomas ran away from her abusive home, she was sent to Thomas J.S. Waxter Children's Center, where a new nightmare began.
I was sexually assaulted there. I didn't even feel safe to take a shower.
She says she suffered from repeated abuse from members of staff over many years.
Who knew about this abuse?
Everybody, because it was happening to all of us.
Thomas later turned to drugs and alcohol, even attempting to take her own life. She says just to block out the horrific memories of her abuse. Now she and around 2,000 others are suing Maryland, many alleging sexual and physical abuse in juvenile detention facilities. The wave of cases came after the state passed a law removing the deadline called the Statute of Limitations for people to file lawsuits related to child sexual abuse occurring anywhere from schools to churches and in state facilities.
Senate Bill 686, House Bill 1, the Child Victims Act of 2023.
Victims could receive $890,000 per occurrence of abuse. Todd Matthews is an attorney representing Thomas and working on thousands of cases similar to hers in Maryland.
So for the first time in Maryland, it gave them a voice. It gave them an avenue for the government to listen to them. I think there's about 5,500 survivors that we know of right now. Survivors oftentimes don't even begin to deal with this until their mid-40s up to their mid-50s. And so there will be more people.
The sheer number of victims created an unanticipated problem and another controversy. 5,500 cases at up to $890,000 each adds up to nearly $5 billion, a massive liability for a state facing a $3 billion budget deficit this year. So recently, Maryland lawmakers rushed to change the law. Delegate C.T. Wilson is a Democrat and abuse survivor himself. He sponsored the original law that opened the way for claims, but in April, he backed a plan to reduce how much money victims could get from $890,000 per occurrence of abuse to $400,000 total.
I never imagined thousands and thousands of victims that the state, is responsible for. So knowing that now, you have to go back and revisit it, because I do owe a duty, not just to the victims of Maryland, but to the taxpayers in Maryland as well.
Is it fair to the victims, though, to say you opened the door for them to come forward and to potentially seek some monetary payment for what happened to them, to now say the state can't afford it?
Well, the thing is, we're not closing the door. They can still come forward, they can still tell their stories, and they can still get a monetary payment. It's just not going to be millions and millions of dollars per person.
Republican Delegate Robin Grammer is against limiting payouts to victims.
If we hadn't spent ourselves into oblivion, if we hadn't bankrupted the state, we wouldn't be in a position where certain people are looking to cut damages for victims.
Thomas's attorney, Matthews, who's also an abuse survivor, says slashing the state's liability reduces the incentive for meaningful change.
Regardless of whether it's a governmental entity, a big corporation, a Catholic church, the way our legal system is set up and the way our society is set up is money makes things different. Look, as a survivor myself, I will tell you, $400,000 is a slap in the face to these survivors because it will not create change. If the government has a limit as to what they're responsible for, it will not create change.
Maryland is not alone in dealing with a groundswell of abuse claims. Lawsuits alleging sexual abuse of juveniles in state care have been filed in more than a dozen states. L.A. County in California recently settled 6,800 cases for $4 billion, the largest settlement so far. Meantime, Matthews says the human cost in Maryland continues to climb.
This is continuing to happen today. We know that because we represent other survivors who have reported abuse in the last 2 years.
Meaning more people like Thomas could come forward years from now.
It destroyed my life for so long, and I didn't think I even deserved better or good.
Any money she might get from the state, providing a measure of accountability for what she and thousands of others have endured.
I'm here for the future generations to come, because no matter what happens, it's not going to give my childhood back. My childhood is gone. I'm about to be a grandma now. But if I can stop it from happening to any other child, then that's why I'm here.
For Full Measure, I'm Mackenzie Frost in Maryland.
And coming up, Chicago's ticking debt time bomb. You may not know it, but Chicago is teetering on the brink of financial ruin, largely driven by the iron grip of powerful unions. Now lawmakers face an urgent challenge: how to rescue the Windy City from collapsing under the weight of its own fiscal promises. Lisa Fletcher reports.
Put your hands up in the air, make some noise for Brandon Johnson!
When Brandon Johnson won the Chicago mayor's race in 2023, most of his donations came from organized labor, half from the teachers union where he once worked.
Make no mistake about it, Chicago is a union town.
Unions have long played a strong role in Chicago politics, and they get political payback from those they help elect. But critics say that dynamic adds to a crisis that's bankrupting the city. Today, 80% of property taxes paid by Chicago residents are allocated to retirement funds. pensions for public workers, including police officers and firefighters. And even that amount falls short of what's needed. When unions negotiate higher salaries and better benefits, it boosts the pensions they're promised later. But Chicago doesn't have the money to cover those future costs, so the pension funds run short. It's like promising a big retirement bonus without putting enough cash aside to pay for it.
The Chicago Teachers Union is a huge problem for Chicago. They strike every 2 to 4 years. They make huge demands. They tend to win.
Ted Dabrowski is president of WirePoints, a Chicago-based nonprofit pushing for an overhaul of how public union pensions are funded.
They're not taking the taxpayer money to put it into the pension funds, but what they have been doing is giving it to the workers to get even bigger salaries, which makes even bigger pensions. So the hole keeps getting bigger. They keep giving out more benefits in order to buy off the unions and get votes. So you've got this kind of marriage between the politicians and the unions to take care of each other, and it's the ordinary people who are left out having to pay bigger and bigger taxes.
Right now, Chicago's pension funds are a shocking $53 billion short. That equates to about $45,000 per household of debt. To help fix the shortfall, the city has doubled property taxes over the past 10 years. But that hasn't done more than stop the bleeding.
This is the amount we need just to tread water so we don't get worse.
For now, says Dabrowski, the city's only plan is to squeeze Chicago's taxpayers at every turn.
What you end up with now in Chicago is you got these red light cameras. Not only do they slow people down, but they also raise a lot of money. There's a $1 fee on every tire you buy. Bottled water, they have fees on everything because that's the way the city has been trying to raise money. Effectively, they nickel and dime you. They're finding money, but it's not real.
In other words, Chicago is finding money, but not any real fix to the larger problem of unions and pensions.
If the pension funds run out of money, then they're going to have to take money from the budget, which means away from crime, away from policing, away from schools, and give it to the pension funds.
Dabrowski says the future of Chicago hinges on the ability to confront its financial challenges head-on.
Rather than letting politicians control the pension fund, give the money to the workers and let the workers manage their own accounts. So you call it a defined contribution or a 401k style account. We should let the workers control their own retirement funds. Why let the politicians continue to make a mess?
While the city struggles to balance its books, Chicago's Board of Education has approved a new contract giving teachers a 20% raise over 4 years, which stands to add billions to the already underfunded pension system. For Full Measure, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Next week on Full Measure, our investigation into the dueling narratives about violent crime under the Biden administration, America's crime stats and the numbers game. Next week on Full Measure. Until then, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.